Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lunch Break Science. I'm Ariel Johnson from the Leakey Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting human evolution research and sharing discoveries and programs like this. We want to thank Anna Gordon Getty and Camilla and George Smith, whose generous support made this episode of Lunch Break Science possible. Here with us today is 2010 Leakey Foundation Baldwin Fellowship Scholar and Research Grant recipient, Dr. Chalachew Seyoum. Chalachew, we are so excited to have you here today. Chalachew hails from Ethiopia and is joining us from Missouri, where he is a lecturer in the Department of Integrative Anatomy at the University of Missouri. He'll be sharing several different of his projects with us today, his research exploring the shift in diets of our early ancestors, his fieldwork in Ethiopia, as well as the comparative anatomy collection that he established at the National Museum of Ethiopia. Just thank you so much, Chalachew, for joining us. We're just so excited to have you here. We've got a lot to talk about today. You've got such a wide breadth of work. But before we get started, I want to remind any of you watching us live on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter to please post comments and questions for Chalachew in the comments section, even if you just say hello. I'm sure we'd love to hear from you. And we'll loop back at the end to answer as many questions as we can. The earlier you put in your question, the more likely it's going to be asked, so get those questions in early. Chalachew, you work with fossils of our ancestors that are millions of years old. How can you tell what they ate, let alone how their diets shifted?
All right. Okay. Thank you, Ariel, for having me on this program. This is a very important question to ask anyone who study human hominin related, especially who is talking about their diet. Yes, we can tell their diet using different ways. There are three commonly used approaches to reconstruct hominin diet in the fossil record. The first one is just to use craniodental morphology by looking the size and shape of the craniodental morphology of a given individual. We can reconstruct the basic diet of hominins. For example, robust facial and large teeth with thick enamel are indicators of hard food. But this doesn't necessarily mean robust hominins had food, hard food item in their diet all the time. Instead, it may tell us more about what that individual or the species it belonged was capable of eating. We have to be very careful, but luckily we have other methods we can reconstruct. So the second evidence of reconstructing diets for hominin comes from microwear. So the different types of food will leave different marks on the surface of the enamel on the teeth. For example, just hard food such as nuts, sage, and grasses tend to leave complex and pitted marks on the top surface of the enamel, whereas tough or soft food items such as fruits, leaves, and meats have simple and scratched surface on the enamel. For example, Australopiths have low complexity with scratches on the surface compared to Paranthropus, which has high complexity with pitted surface structure. The third piece of evidence comes from isotope signals You can see on this slide, different type of food contain different chemical ratio, so we can able to obtain information about hominin diets by studying the chemical elements in the fossilized teeth. Hominins who consumed fruit and leaves tend to have low carbon isotope, while hominins who consumed sedges and grasses tend to have higher carbon isotope, as you can see on this plot. This figure is from Sponheimer et al. 2013. The stable carbon isotope data from the fossil hominin suggests a significant increase in dietary breeds around 3.5 million years ago. Early hominins, Ardipithecus and Australopithecus anamensis, have narrow C3-dominated diet, whereas later hominin Australopithecus afarensis and Kenyanthropus have wider isotopic sample and consumed both C3 and C4 plants. And the isotope data we saw on the previous slide for a dietary niche expansion around 3.5 million years ago are also supported by the findings of the Dikika cut marks and the Lumokian stone tools, which suggests us that they systematically processing and consumption of meat as important part of their diet around this time period. So this is really interesting time period, and we can see the expansion in diet.
That's so neat. What was it that drove this change?
Actually, the goal of my dissertation research was to investigate the underpinning factor for dietary niche expansion around 3.5 million years ago. For this purpose, as you can see on this slide, I used tooth crown height. Tooth crown height we also called hypsodonty and tooth wear, mesowear of large herbivores. The reason we use herbivores because they are, as a primary consumers, they are closely tied to the climate and the vegetational aspect of their habitat. So herbivore tooth crown height is highly correlated with rainfall, and we can also place the tooth crown height into 3 different groups. This includes here like high crown or hypsodont, low crown, the brachydont on the right side, and the intermediate we call it mesodont in the middle. And in general, mean tooth crown height increases with the decreasing mean annual rainfall. In other words, species living in high rainfall area have on average lower crown teeth than species who are living in regions with low rainfall. So according to this analysis, the tooth crown height study, Ardipithecus ramidus and Australopithecus anamensis lived in an environment where annual rainfall was higher compared to Australopithecus afarensis and Kenyanthropus. I use the mesowear on this for this purpose. The combined mesowear scoring it combines the technique of scoring the shape and relief of the cusp, which allows us to group herbivores into dietary groups as grazers, browsers, and mixed feeders. So grazers have high degree of abrasion low relief and blunt or round cusp on the right side on the image. And browsers have low degree of aberration wear, which means high relief and sharp cusp. And mixed feeders fall intermediate. Thus, measure score indicates level of abrasiveness of the dyes a species had to cope up with, and in turn that tells us in what kind of habitat they lived. So hominins, as part of the ecology, were responding to this habitat change by modifying their diet to a certain extent. Therefore, the dietary niche can be explained in the hominin lineage, can be explained by seasonal changes in which rainy seasons were becoming shorter and the drier seasons becoming hotter and longer in the later hominins. So we can see this difference between hominins who lived before 3.5 million years ago, yeah, which includes Ardipithecus ramidus and Australopithecus anamensis, and hominin species who lived after 3.5 million years, Australopithecus afarensis and Kenyanthropus, lived in a more open and drier habitat and environment. So that may be driving their adaptation to a broader dietary niche.
Yeah, you don't really think how climate could play a role in this. Now, in addition to sitting collections, you also are out in the field finding new fossils. With such an expansive area to explore, I mean, how do you know where to look to find fossils? I mean, how do you find fossils?
Oh, yeah, I like that question. It is very interesting because every paleoanthropologist or paleontologist need to explain to everyone how we find these fossils. Yeah, this is a kind of question I often asked, and people just ask me how lucky we are to find all these wonderful fossil discoveries. There could be a little bit of luck given the rarity of hominin specimens in the fossil record.
Yeah.
But it is all about knowledge and good strategy to look for fossils. So you can't go just you can't go and look for fossils anywhere on the surface of the Earth. First, you have to identify sediments that signal that there are fossil-bearing exposures based on satellite image. This is where the geologists play a bigger role to help us identify this kind of areas. So it is a multidisciplinary research which includes many fields, and we need to design a clear and convincing proposal for the granting agents like the Leakey grant and the National Science Foundation to secure money to go to the field, and also the country where your potential research site is located to get your permit.
Yeah.
So then you can plan your expedition to go to these sites and look for fossils. Once you are in the site, we can walk across the landscape and look for fossils. We can look for fossils on these sediments. It is common to find other kind of fossil remains in most of these exposures, but usually it takes many years to find hominin fossils. if we find any fragment of hominin specimen, that's where we know that we just hit the jackpot. That's a very clear indication we are getting close to find something bigger. So it requires a lot of work to find these rare hominin fossils. So it's also very demanding to identify potential localities, but it is also possible, as has been shown for us for the last many years. People have been discovering really productive sites and fossils, like including hominins. So yeah.
It's amazing to kind of hear about how much really goes into the strategicness of finding just the right conditions to find fossils. And in 2015, at the site of Ledi Gararu that you just showed us a slide of, you made a rather special discovery. Could you tell us a little bit about what you found and what it was like to make a find like that?
There are so many stories to have during hominin discoveries in every project. If you ask someone who found hominin, they will tell you a lot of things, interesting stories. But I would like to put it this way. So on that morning, we were looking for hominin fossils in the Liaidoita locality in the Ledi Gararu research site. And at one point, I decided to look around in that particular hill. And after a few minutes of my survey, I saw a piece of tooth sticking out of the loose sediments. And just like, I immediately realized that is a hominin tooth piece. And then I sat down and I pulled out part of a jaw, and I immediately saw a fresh break from the jaw. So I knew there is something around because it is a fresh break. Then continued my search and found the other piece of the jaw in about 2 minutes, which perfectly fit with the other part of the jaw, which I already found. So and then I called everyone to come over and celebrate. And as you can imagine, everyone was running and just they came to where I found the fossil, and just we start celebrating, and there was lots of handshake and hugs. Yeah. So one thing I remember was when we look at the mandible right on the spot. It was small and Australopithecus afarensis like specimen. So just we talked about among ourselves. We said, if this specimen is not something different, it could be late surviving, part of the late surviving population of Australopithecus afarensis, because we don't have, and still that if it was Australopithecus afarensis would be very critical, because we don't have Australopithecus afarensis specimen younger than 2.9 million years ago, since we know the Ledi Gararu is younger than 2.95 million years ago. So exactly. That was really good, but in our later analysis, it turns out being the earliest specimen of the genus Homo. Yes, that was a big payoff for the entire crew who has been working in the Ledi Gararu for several years.
It's so interesting. And, how does this fossil fit into the bigger picture when we're considering evolution?
Yeah, this is one, it is a jaw, right? But
Yeah.
It is very important at a critical time. So until the discovery of this specimen, the oldest Homo fossil was believed to be around 2.3, 2.4 million years old. So our discovery has pushed back the earliest evidence for the genus Homo to 2.8 million years ago. So this specimen was dated at 2.8 million. So around 400, and 400,000 years earlier than previously thought. So that's one important part. The other thing is the Lady Guerrero research area by itself preserves critical sediments representing the age intervals between 2.95 and 2.5 million years, which is least understood time period in the region, maybe even in Eastern Africa. And this mandible provides us a great opportunity to better understand the contextual evolution and shift in hominin behavior and morphology. But still, we need more part of it or family member. But still, this helps us to look at some of the things. And it has been, it also has both primitive Australopithecus afarensis-like and derived human-like characteristics, which is important transitional, which makes it transitional fossil in a critical time period, like I mentioned earlier, in the hominin evolution. And this helps to narrow the evolutionary gap we had for many years between Australopithecus afarensis and the early member of the genus Homo. Yeah, so it plays a lot, as you can see here. Also, it falls right where we are missing more fossils.
Oh, it's so fascinating to hear about, hear from someone who's actually discovered something so important. But I know that that's not the only thing you've got. You've got a new project coming up. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, yes. I I was recently granted a permit by the Ethiopian government, particularly by the Authority for Research and Conservation of Cultural Heritage, the institution which regulates all hominin-related research in Ethiopia, to conduct research in the Kivish site in the southern Ethiopia. This is the site where some of the earliest member of Homo sapiens that are dated to around 200,000 years, the time period during which early modern humans are believed to have emerged around this time period. So this site is also has numerous archaeological localities and a lot of paleontological fossil records, and it is very interesting. I'm excited, and so I am preparing for my upcoming field expedition in the southern part of Ethiopia.
Awesome. So, what do you expect to find there? Or too early to tell?
It's hard to tell, but as I stated at the beginning, when we go somewhere, we know what we are looking for. If we find something, I know what time period it will be, what kind of question we will address using that discovery. Yeah. So I am planning to revisit the previously identified. This site was, surveyed by many research groups in previous years. So I would like to revisit the previously identified localities, including the localities which yielded us the Homo 1 and Homo 2 skull here, and identify new localities as well. But the ultimate goal of this new project is to further the survey of the research site and uncover more fossils in the Kivish Formation in order to assess the fundamental questions involving the process that resulted in the transition from early Homo to fully modern human between 300 to 200,000 years.
Wonderful. We're running out of time, but I still want to ask you a little bit about the your other project, because I know that's one of your heart projects. The Leakey Foundation recently awarded you a grant to help you expand the comparative anatomy collection at the National Museum of Ethiopia. What inspired you to start that collection?
Oh, a lot of things. But so comparative anatomy, that's my really other project. And the comparative collections remain the basis of any taxonomic determination. Dental and skeletal morphologies of living species generally help us identify fossil specimens and teach students. Unfortunately, this is rarely the case, and few museums are lucky enough to have such a collection. Most of these museums are in Europe and in the United States. Also, Ethiopia is well known for its biodiversity, endemic species, and abundant fossil fauna that, including hominin remains. There was no comparative collection in the National Museum of Ethiopia that can be used for research and education. This obviously poses problem for researchers working on Ethiopian fauna, and especially for Ethiopian researchers like me, who don't have the opportunity by the time to travel to Europe or the United States to gain access to this collection. I'm a good example. When I did my master's, I had to travel to the United States thanks to Dr. Zarasanai and others just to travel to US and do my comparative study. So this is why I initiated this project in 2010 and established the comparative anatomy collection in the National Museum of Ethiopia. And currently, our comparative collection contains around 1,000 specimens, and a good number of these specimens are complete skeletons. And this includes more than 20 complete Theropithecus chelada skeleton, the largest collection in the world, which makes me happy all the time. Like I'm just giving few examples, 5 Ethiopian wolf, which are also endemic, and we have also like 5 complete lion skeleton. And the other objective of this project is to build expertise in the National Museum of Ethiopia to support the long-term education and management of this skeletal collection we are making now as a resource for education and research in the country. So far, I trained 5 employees in the ARCCH, of which 2 are currently working as a curator in the collection, which makes me, again, very happy. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, we're going to quickly jump over and take some questions from the audience. If you have your questions, please get them up there. We have our first one. Do you find fossil remains of seeds or specific plants associated with the various hominid fossils to help establish diet?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Can we get it back up? Do you find fossil remains of seeds or specific plants associated with the various hominid fossils to help you establish diet?
Oh, yeah. Their vegetation is important. So the seeds tell us what kind of vegetation was there. So there are people who study vegetation and they help us to reconstruct the paleo environment as well as the diets of species who lived in that particular time period and space. Yes.
Wonderful. What about our next question?
I don't see it.
Where it should be coming any moment. How is cross-border fossil exploration like in the Kabish Formation?
Cross-border fossil exploration. This means collaboration? Is this a question if I did get it? I don't know. If it's talking about the potential of collaboration, something, maybe I missed this question.
Well, I know quite a few recent finds from South Africa have been uploaded in 3D images. Do you find these to be helpful for your comparisons?
Yeah, 3Ds are important data for comparative purpose, and even one of the things we should do in every sites, I believe, if they are published, I know, should be put in the 3D and make them available to students and other researchers, and definitely that makes things much easier. And so we are moving on with the technology. Yes,
absolutely. Why don't we take one last question because we're running out of time? Should be popping up any moment now. Or are we? Oh, we have no more questions right now. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to submit them after. Here we go. Do you think we could find genomic causes for these past adaptations?
genomic. I don't know. I am not sure about that. How we can use. I'm not. I never thought about that, and could be if we have the evidence, the data, we can look at. But I don't know.
Well, we'll maybe have to consider that for an upcoming topic for a lunch break science. But thank you so much for joining us, Chalachew. It was really wonderful to have you. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a really fun talk, and it was so interesting hearing about your research. For our viewers, please visit us at leakeyfoundation.org to learn more about the Leakey Foundation, Chalachew Seyoum, and how you can help support research like Chalachew's and educational programs like Lunch Break Science. Right now, all donations will be doubled by 2 generous donors, meaning your impact will be doubled. Next Thursday, we meet Leakey Foundation scientist Jenny Tung and hear about her work on social experience and health impact. Be sure to subscribe to the Leakey Foundation's YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or sign up for our newsletter to be the first to hear about upcoming events and episodes of Lunch Break Science and groundbreaking discoveries in human evolution research. Still hungry for science and can't wait till next week? Check out the Leakey Foundation's award-winning podcast, Origin Stories. Check out episode 5, Discovery at Leti Gararu, with today's guest, Chalachew. Lunch Break Science is made possible by the generous support of Ann and Gordon Getty and Camille and George Smith. Thank you so much for joining us and taking a break from your day and feeding your brain with the Leakey Foundation. Until next week, stay hungry for knowledge.